Mambu's digital banking platform allows both fintech companies and traditional banks to innovate on lending and deposit offerings. The Berlin-based company launched in 2011 and has expanded rapidly across the globe. Here with more about the background of Mambu is Ali Paterson, editor-in-chief of Fintech Finance. He will sit down with Eugene Danilkis, co-founder and CEO of Mambu, to find out how the company is looking to digitize banking across the world. Ali and Eugene, over to you for our next episode of Founder Stories.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. I am very pleased to be joined by Eugene. I'm completely fluffed your surname there, Eugene. I'm so sorry, Eugene Danilkis, right?
Danilkis, yeah. Danilkis.
I've got it. I know it. I just completely welcome Eugene, who is the founder and CEO of Monzo. And you're coming to us from Amsterdam, right?
From Mambu and in Amsterdam. That's right, yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, first of all, I've got to say, big fan of Mambu.
Love the shirt.
Absolutely. That was from, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, is that was from 2016. When there was literally a handful of you guys, and now I think there's you're close to the door of 400. But it's about 500 people now, isn't it, at Mambu?
Yeah, that's right. We're getting close to that 500 person mark. Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years basically since we met.
Amazing. Well, let's wind the clock back. I want to start with, what's the legend? Every company has that legend that kind of gets said again, and is that story, that legacy as to how Mambu came to being. What is the Mambu legend?
Well, I wish our story had something like Obama owes in the history, but nothing quite like that. But maybe I'll give you a little bit on myself, I guess, and then tell you how this company started. So I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I studied computer science, so real techie background. I worked in the space for a while, and I got into the whole finance domain actually when I was doing my master's over in the US. And we were doing basically a project, like a consulting project with like a traditional core banking vendor. And this was like 2009. And so we were kind of exploring like, what's the opportunities for technology, the next wave of financial services technology, like really open-ended, right? And you have to kind of remember the context of this in 2009, right? So you had the smartphone, you had the iPhone that was like roughly 2 years old, right? You had, in emerging markets, you had like 3 billion people that had literally zero access to formal finance. I think if you look at a market like Africa, I don't know, maybe 10, 20% of the population had access to internet at the time, right? So a lot of things that we take for granted right now, sitting here in 2020, we're still just very much on the cusp, basically, in 2009. And so we started kind of exploring the whole entire sector of like, what's happening in financial technology, what's happening in financial inclusion, or what's the impact of mobile technology. And what we started to kind of realize that, there was going to be a new wave of companies that are going to be providing digital first, mobile first financial services technology. There wasn't much of a fintech thing to talk about back then, but we realized that all of these trends are pointing to the fact that, the way that financial services is going to be built in the next decade is going to look different than how it was built over the last 30, 40, 50 years because of all these new technologies. So we got all excited about like the stuff you could build with smartphones and do the kind of stuff that Monzo and Revolut are doing right now. But we also start to realize that, in all the other industries, the underpinning technology that enabled this sort of innovation has changed, and it hasn't changed at all in banking. And so we looked at the model of like what Salesforce was doing with CRM and what NetSuite was doing with ERP, and we were saying, well, where is this in financial technology? Like none of the whole entire foundation of how financial technology is divided, is created, and how it's distributed has really fundamentally changed in any meaningful way. And none of it has caught on to any of the trends of cloud, SaaS, et cetera, that were so prominent like in the late 2000s. And so it became really clear to us that if you were going to have 3 billion people over the next 10, 20, 30 years come into the formal financial sector, if you're going to have people interact with financial technology in much more modern ways with their smartphone, in much more digital ways, then there's going to have to be an underpinning platform that provides the foundational services for those organizations. And so that's what we decided to build with Mambu. We were really inspired by all those major trends. And, we didn't have the word fintech to talk about back then, but we felt like, the fintech movement was something that was almost inevitable because we saw how much of an impact it had in almost every other industry.
Amazing, amazing. And you kind of have had that impact because you've got some incredible clients that the likes of Oak North, which we're here speaking earlier, N26, as well as some speedboat banks as well, such as New 10 from ABN AMRO. But your clients seem to literally span the world. I'm also aware that one of the things you're quite proud of is, I don't want to get too kind of woolly with it, but it's the people. Because the Mambuvian culture seems to be very innovation first. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I gather you've never actually lost a customer to date. And that attention to customers, how are you able to bring in that culture and spread that literally all over the world? Because you talked about financial inclusion there. You're dealing with clients and different needs in the likes of Africa, LATAM, the US, the UK. How are you able to bring that culture and have that for the whole world?
Yeah, so I think it was always very much kind of a little bit in our DNA, our founding DNA of being international as a company. So, I mean, even, the co-founders of the company come from 3 different nationalities. Our first, I think 10 of our first Mambuvians were probably from 8 or 9 different nationalities. Our first 6 customers also have to be in 6 completely different countries. So we were extremely used to, the cultural sensitivities of diversity, both internally within Mambu, but also dealing it from the customer's perspective, right? So I think we really see ourselves as kind of a truly European company in that kind of international, cultural kind of way, as in the diversity effectively that kind of comes into the company. And, it was easy in some sense to build it up when it was really small because you have such a close connection to, as founders, we would literally go for lunch with the whole entire team, basically, right? And so it was really easy to keep everything close together. But as we started growing, there was, I think, different things that we did really well, where we were really always focusing people we were hiring. And, as we were a small company, we were involved in hiring everybody at some stage of the process. And we really, kept a close eye on cultural fit. And what we looked at specifically on cultural fit was, were these people who were joining us, were they curious? Were they interested to learn, right? Were they adaptive in themselves, right? We didn't need people that mirrored us, but we wanted people who had this intellectual curiosity and thirst for knowledge, and were interested in questioning the status quo. And questioning the status quo from the market, they would question us as founders as to, well, why are you doing it that way, not some other way? And there's people who were always wanting to make things better, basically. And so I think that's something that we always looked for, whether it was from an individual contributor or a leader. That was always a really big attribute within the company, and something that we hopefully inspired in our leaders now, which are hiring other people, to also look for. But in a very practical way, I think one of the things that we do right now, now that we're, we have people which are Mambuvians literally sitting in, I think last I checked, 35 countries around the world, right? Literally from the US to, we have people in Brazil, we have people in Indonesia, UK, South Africa, right? While we have, 5 or 6 main offices, there's 500 Mambuvians spread out across literally 30 countries right now, basically. And so what we've done actually recently is we've really spent a lot of time to get a really good heartbeat, and we do this every 6 months with a pretty detailed cultural engagement kind of survey, and we look for a lot of different factors what's happening with the teams, and then we slice it down as to what's helping to drive engagement, which teams are happy and what are they happy about, and try to then dive into specific things that are different between teams, and then talk to those leaders to see to try to perhaps address issues or to try to continue to strengthen something that's working well. So at our scale right now of 500 people and growing to 1,000 people over the next couple of years, it's that kind of stuff that, helps us to actually still keep a close heartbeat on it, because of course it's impossible to talk to everybody. It's impossible for us to get a close cultural feel on everyone that joins. And hopefully our leaders do that. But this sort of surveying tooling, which we spend quite a bit of attention to as an executive team and a board, I think is really important.
Absolutely. That quote from you there, that's gonna be stuck in my head now. Hire people who challenge the status quo.
Hire people who challenge the founders, yeah.
With that in mind, so challenging the status quo, you guys are one of the first cloud native, and I mean that cloud native organizations to offer this kind of core platform. And then some of the competitors out there, those that were founded, sort of 20, 25, 30 years ago, they don't have that opportunity to be cloud native. They have had to migrate. What are some of the big advantages that you have over, because you the likes of you and Thought Machine 10x, etc., you are challenging the Finastra, Temenos, Fiservs out there. Why do you have that opportunity and that advantage over them by being so young?
So I think over the last 10 years, the word cloud's become really a loaded word, actually, right? I mean, cloud, when it first came around, really meant, AWS data centers in a different place, right? Before the whole entire software as a service model came around. So that's what it kind of meant. And then the word started to take on more and more meaning. I think different people have a different idea of what that word actually means. So for us, when we talk about cloud, I think the real bigger thing for us is software as a service, of which you naturally run software as a service in the cloud. But actually, the real differentiator is really at the software as a service level, much more so than at the cloud level. And what I mean by software as a service is there's a lot of different attributes about software as a service as the way of how you design, distribute, and service your technology. It's about the fact, of course, it has all the elements of cloud like scalability, security, all those sort of things, but they're also provided as a service in the sense that the customer doesn't actually care or is in any way interested in how you do those things. They're just caring about what the result is in terms of what are your SLAs, how do you meet them, etc. But also the technology itself is fundamentally designed to be self-service in the sense of the ideal outcome is that you as either a business user or a technology user or someone who integrates our services to something else can fundamentally and should be able to do whatever you want on the platform. It doesn't mean you always can do it, but if you've ever used Salesforce, of course, there's lots of Salesforce consultants, but fundamentally, if you actually know everything about Salesforce, you could just do everything yourself, right? So it's the same sort of philosophy of really this whole entire enablement for organizations to have all of the both business and technical tools to be able to do everything as quickly as they fundamentally can and have that real business agility behind it. And I think the other part that matters in service is also how you design, the way that you onboard customers, the way you support them. Is that really the whole entire end-to-end experience of you're fundamentally getting really a service, right? It just happens to be that the service is software and it happens to be running on the cloud, whether it's on AWS or Google or Azure.
Excellent. We're just running out of time now, but one last thing I want to put to you is one piece of advice. If you've got one of those mavericks out there thinking, I've got a perfect niche where I can start my own bank, I can start my own SME lender, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to those upcoming founders of the next wave of financial services?
I would say
hire mavericks.
That's right, yeah. I would say really spend some time to really figure out what it is that differentiating niche, right? Whether that differentiation is how you deliver your services or a particular market niche you focus on. I think spend a lot of time iterating on figuring out what that first niche is, whether that is a multi-billion-dollar market or it's a small one, but really find out that unique USP. And then really focus on what do you as an organization need to build to support that, whether it's an amazing mobile app or you got to come up with some sort of really creative pricing engine, or you got to figure out some way to acquire customers. If you know your particular niche, figure out what is that really couple critical things that you need to really own that market, and then spend all of your resources, whether that's your mental energy, your time, your money, to build that capability. And for everything else, look at the ecosystem of different fintechs and solutions of partners that can help you bring that to market. And make sure you focus on the real stuff that really helps you to break into that one niche. And then go figure out what the next niche is. And then from there, you can turn, $1 million niche into a multi-billion-dollar company by going one niche at a time. Or
a 4-person cloud-based core banking platform up to a 500 growing one. Thank you. We're out of time now, Eugene. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We will catch up with you all very, very soon. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ali. Cheers.
Ali and Eugene, thank you for walking us through Mambu's founding story and how the company plans to continue to supercharge banking with their digital banking platform. Now, on other events coming up at SFF, a meetup with Melissa Guzzi, co-founder and managing partner at Arbor Ventures. That's going to take place in about 20 minutes from now. Remember, Melissa Guzzi, about 20 minutes from now. Make sure to stay with us.